This meeting is being recorded.
So welcome to this episode 5 of The Great Debate, where we tend to have 3 to 4 panelists and a judge. While there is no judging really, this activity, this session I'm calling is Fun Come Learn. So there should be fun also. But when 3 people are sitting together with experience, we will learn. Learning sharing is forever. Even if I'm arranging the sessions, the debates, I'm learning in this process. I'm a lifelong learner myself. So recording will be available later on to people. The topic that we had chosen for this evening's or this night's or this morning's discussion was the Force Majeure Clause. So I'll attempt to start by sharing my screen. Give me a few seconds, please. And it seems there's a challenge with the PPT. Wow, Microsoft PowerPoint not working.
No, it's not there, sir.
Let me see.
We see only Vision 2020, 2030 and you.
Yeah. And let me attempt once again. I hope you all can see it now. All right.
Yeah.
Great. So panelist Judge Puneet, she was busy. She said she would be a little late to join. We understand she has a young baby also, and even if it's a Saturday weekend started or half weekend gone, there are many of us working even over weekends. So those would be the reasons. Partha should be joining any moment, I believe. And we do have Anand Sampath with us, a new panelist. This is also one of the reasons that sometimes I fall short of the panelist, because I'm saying attempt is that we have a different person talking in the group every time. So Anand is founder and CEO of Odbatar Technologies Private Limited. Partha, I'll say as of now, when he joins, then perhaps we would be in the middle of the discussions. I will not be able to introduce them. Is a senior GRC security BCM and transformation professional. Moderator, myself, about 35 years in the industry, 10,000 hours in training, teaching. I'm a practitioner myself, have dirtied my hands, trainer, auditor, consultant, author, speaker, etc. I won awards multiple times nationally and globally. Repeating, the topic today we had kept was Force Majeure Clause. Many of us generally would be close to BCM. Many of us have slowly started understanding operational resilience and organizational resilience also, while either because of BCM or otherwise, we would understand risk management, crisis management, ITDR, information security, etc. also. Force Majeure Clause, when I came across first time, was through BCM. When I stepped into this domain, I came across Force Majeure Clause also at that time. So the first question, and as of now, I'll say I'm requesting first the panelists, but because we have only 2 more as of now, if you, Ashit, and I forgot the other name, Solomon, yes. If you wish, you can also participate, give your points of view as well. So what is Force Majeure Clause? That's the first question in mind. What is Force Majeure Clause according to you? And I stop sharing my screen so that we can see each other boldly. You can switch on your cameras also if you wish. And first the question to you. Your understanding of Force Majeure Clause.
Force Majeure Clause is basically a clause which is there normally in many agreements that anything untoward happens which is beyond anyone's control, right, like natural disasters or anything like that. And the agreements of the contract, the clauses of the contract or the agreement are not fulfilled.
Okay.
So nobody should be penalized because then there is a legal violation, but that gives you an exemption or a waiver that you did not do it deliberately. It was a force of nature or whatever may have happened.
Okay.
Like in my case, I am stuck here because of COVID-19. There is nothing I can do about it. I was to go and do audit on site, but I could not do it. So I have to do audit remotely. So in
And
that
Ashit,
we
hold
have,
on, please. This is a real case. So I would like to ask a little additional question from you on this, right? So stay with that. Don't say any more than this. But you said that you actually were supposed to do an audit and you are stuck because of COVID-19. All right. Anand, your views.
Yeah, Daman. So I guess, Ashit has explained it, I would say, substantially. I'd just like to add, or probably add to my, add to his comments to say that one is clearly it's a scenario that you have not anticipated, and it's a contractual obligation, or a, or an opportunity to get away from a contractual obligation if you insert it in a contract. So unless and until that is there, you obviously can't exercise it. And the general principle of force majeure is, it's something like, exactly like Ashit mentioned, something that's happened which is beyond your control and has resulted in your inability to perform. And you want to take the support of that clause to say that things were out of your control and you may not be penalized.
Okay.
So it can also give you an opportunity to say exit the contract or to avoid any penal damages that may happen. So that's fundamentally what its purpose is.
Okay.
But it is
and I'll
something
give
that
you
should be
another
unanticipated.
instance, Daman. Again, same thing happened. I'm also PCI DSS QSA,
Right.
and my research is due by 17th of May.
All right.
Now I'm stuck with COVID-19, so I send them a request. I said, this is what has happened. So if I don't do that, that means my certificate would expire as a QSA for PCI DSS. Then I won't be able to do PCI DSS audit.
All right.
So they considered that because that was a part of the agreement with the company.
Right.
So I sent them the details and I said that this is what has happened. I can't do anything. Doctor has advised me to take rest and don't expect me to focus on that 8 hours of training when
Right.
you're down with COVID. So they understood and they gave me extension till end of the month.
Good. Good. Thanks, Ashit.
That's another example. We can't
Right.
answer.
Right. Solomon has typed in a message. He's in travel. He's actually on train. He says then he's getting disconnections. So we understand that, Solomon. I respect that also. Ashit, if you can come live once again, because we understand that perhaps you will also be leaving a little early because you need to take up your medication. Can you switch on the camera? Then I would have asked this question a little later, but I'm jumping, making a little change for both of you, Ashit and Anand. So when this is the case that you are supposed to be at some place for audit, but because of COVID-19 pandemic, the infection that happened to you, and this example came out when we are doing the discussions about force majeure clause. So the question is, first to Ashit, are you in this case invoking or have you invoked the force majeure?
It was not exactly force majeure, Daman, in this case because client knew it.
Okay.
Client was made aware of it.
Right.
Yes, with my company on whose behalf I am doing it, there was an agreement that this was an on-site audit.
Okay.
But now with COVID-19, I can't go anywhere. So
Right.
they understand it and
Yes.
that waiver is given that I can do off-site or remote.
Right.
So that waiver is given.
Right. So in both cases, it seems to me, Ashit, it has happened. This is a real case, right? And the recertification that you are saying that was due on 17th May, but is delayed, will be delayed. You wrote to the client perhaps, or whoever was the party involved.
Yes.
They have been reasonable with you and they have understood that yes, either
Absolutely.
it will be done in a different way or it will be delayed whenever you are well, and we wish you speedy recovery and you do that. Another question is, have you ever, you means your organization also, previous organizations also, whatever experience is, actually invoked the clause, force majeure clause, and what was that condition?
It's a question for me or Anand?
To Anand
No,
first.
it was for me, but I guess, yeah. So Daman, no, I've not had any direct experiences.
Okay.
I think the only probably case that I could talk about is I think when I think insurance companies tried to initially
Right.
they tried to invoke the force majeure to kind of avoid paying this hospitalization fees to
Due to
the
for
insured.
COVID-19.
But later on, the government kind of quashed it and said that that's nonsense and it doesn't
Right.
apply to this. So incidentally, that's something that I remember because a lot of friends initially they were talking about it.
Right.
As a business, we never had an opportunity to do it in the last 4 to 5 years. I do not recollect directly discussing a force majeure uh, in my earlier organization where I was working for directly, because I think the legal team would probably have known it. But we have definitely, but I've seen it in other clients'
Okay.
places, especially for example the construction industry, right?
All right.
A lot of the construction industry folks work on government projects, right?
Right.
And they're all subject to heavy liquidated damages in case there are delays.
Right.
And what I understand is the government had waived that during the COVID period because we had shortage of workmen, right? Contract workmen, etc.
Right.
People went back to their respective places. So I know that the waiver came in, which means that effectively it was utilized, but not a direct experience. So these are two cases that I very clearly remember:
All right. Okay.
insurance and this. Yeah,
Good. So
one
I'll share.
denied, one accepted.
Right. I'll share my experience. I'll admit I have not. Only one case long ago when I was global VC manager. At that time, once we wanted to invoke force majeure clause, it went to our legal team and then said legal, right? It went to our legal team. 3 days gone, we were not able to get the decision whether it was a force majeure event and whether we would be able to invoke this clause. And in 3 days, actually, we were up and running once again. So even if at once, at least we attempted to, we still were not. Actually, we didn't invoke. Actually, I'm looking for during these last 2 years when we are calling it extended COVID-19 pandemic period. Is there anyone, even if not you? So this question is to both of you now. Are you aware of any organization that might have has invoked force majeure clause because of COVID-19 pandemic? So is COVID-19 pandemic a force majeure event? Maybe two portions of the question.
I
Well,
can take a
I
stab.
think
Let Ashit finish though. Please,
All right.
Ashit, go ahead.
no. What I'm saying is that there are several instances, Daman, during COVID-19 about the audits, where audits had to be postponed. Uh, People have been given special extension to extend their certificate.
Right, we know that.
Now, normally it doesn't happen that certificate expires,
Right,
but if the facility is shut down, it happened with me in the case of one of the companies, e-waste
right,
recycler. I was to go on site and do it, and COVID-19 struck. There, 8 people were down. So they shut down the whole facility. They need to sanitize everything and so on and so
right.
forth. They had to go back to the certification body and said that there is no way we can conduct audit because we don't have anyone who put you to conduct, and then the facility is closed down. That was a CDC directive.
Ashit, if you
So,
do not mind, can you adjust your camera a little bit, please?
so, so, so then the certification body understood it was the part of the agreement with the company that any such event happens, they need to inform well in advance so that they can give them temporary extension.
Right,
So they were given, I think, 3 months extension or something. Uh, on the ground of them, they had to go to ANAB and ask for the waiver also. That was a different thing, but
right.
that was documented that the
Okay.
facility was shut
So,
down, and hence the audit certificate was extended for 3 months.
so I also know this such case exactly like this. A client approached us that the month recertification is due. Can you help us in preparation? And there was just actually They woke up a month before recertification date, and this is what I had recommended. Actually, whatever may be the reason, you have a way out currently because of COVID-19 pandemic. Please request your certifying agency based on this if some extension is available to you, and then they were granted some extension. But I'm still sensing this, Ashit, that it's you and me being good guys. Question is, did I invoke force majeure clause? That because of COVID-19 pandemic, now I'm not able to concentrate on my recertification. Please extend the date. I'm using those words. I'm invoking force majeure clause. It was just because I requested, you agreed, yes, okay, we extend your date, Daman.
Normally, they need a very bona fide reason why. And you have to prove that it may not be COVID-19, but some other family circumstances or anything like that. I give you one more example. And this is actually, all these examples have happened with me real time.
Okay.
So in 2016, I was actually in Austin to take my on-site PCI DSS QSA, because that's where I got my research second time. And I was in Austin on the very first day. And that night, when the course was to start, very same day in the morning, I got the news my older sister died in an accident in India. Okay. And she, the boat capsized, my brother-in-law got saved, my sister died. So now what to do, because this was a certification exam. So what do I do? So I went to the course coordinator and I explained to them that this is what has happened. So nothing like force majeure or anything. I said, this has happened just last night. And that was India's morning time. And I am just informing you. So I need to rush to Bombay because they are holding back my sister's cremation.
Right.
They are waiting for me and my nephew. My nephew is in Chicago, her older son. So both were to reach India the next day.
Right.
So my brother-in-law asked me, Ashit, if you can't come, we will film it. I said, no, Mukesh bhai, his name is Mukesh. So I said, no, Mukesh bhai, I'm coming. I want to see my sister before she goes, before you cremate her. And I took the flight very same day, went to Austin to Newark,
Okay.
and went to India straight from there.
So once
And
again,
I asked the council that this is what has happened. They said, don't worry.
right.
You go. We will put you in next class. No
Right. So
problem.
it still appears to me that we two are attempting to be good, reasonable with each other, even without bringing the force majeure clause in picture so far. Right. Anand, your views, if you have any such experiences.
Yeah. So, like I said, we've not triggered anything, Daman. But what I would like to say is that since the pandemic started, I don't think that COVID-19 can anymore be used as a force majeure excuse.
Wow.
The reason is
Why?
that
Yeah.
this is my belief. Okay, this is
Yeah,
just my
would
belief
like to
that if
understand.
I were working with my lawyer,
Okay.
see, typically what happens is any contract you have to cover all the scenarios that are possible. That's the duty of the legal team in any contract between.
Right.
So if COVID-19 is very rampant, like for example, I needed to travel to US for a risk management exhibition, right?
Right.
So very clearly the conditions relating to COVID is there. So they say very clearly that in case you contract COVID, right, after coming to the US, or if you contract COVID before coming to US, then under certain conditions, there will not be a clear refund. So they're already capturing it in an existing contract today,
Right.
because they can reasonably anticipate the scenario. And that is true for any performance. And this is a very simple thing for, paying fees to attend an exhibition.
Right.
But the same thing can happen to very large contracts, right?
Right.
So the waiver, if any, could have been given for unforeseen situations. Today, you cannot say COVID-19 is unforeseen anymore.
Okay.
So any contract that is being constructed today, in my view, force majeure may not hold water if it by reasonable expectation you could have kind of understood that COVID-19 can be a derailer, right? So
Right.
you have to accommodate that in your project, expand your project plan, build in uncertainty, and cover it in your language.
Okay.
But you can't say, today we have a wave,
Okay.
so I'm not able to perform. But 2 months back there was no wave, so I could have performed. I don't think that those options will work anymore, is my personal view.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, both of you.
COVID-19, only
I will
COVID-19.
say,
I'm saying.
yes,
Others
sorry.
will continue as this.
Yeah.
COVID-19 alone, I'm talking about.
All
The
right.
rest of the force majeure can still continue.
Right. Okay. Which also, like, while this is a view he has said he believes, right? And I'm saying perhaps no one has made this change yet, not to my knowledge. It still appears, maybe because that's the default language and no one perhaps bothers or cares to look into that and make that refinement. But at least one person sitting here is saying that it may not be appearing anymore in the list. The way I would have explained in the past to my clients or to my participants in the courses, what is force majeure clause? I would say this way, that if you are my client, both of you, and I'm the supplier, what I'm saying is with folded hands, dear customer, if I'm not able to provide services to you due to something which is beyond my control, actually the word that we use is beyond a reasonable control, please do not penalize me for that. That's what I'm saying in this clause. While the legal language is complex and perhaps we cannot make much sense out of that. So quickly, just 30 seconds, both of you, I will say your remarks on this with what I have been saying or I had been saying. With folded hands, dear customer, please do not penalize me for something which is beyond my control or beyond my reasonable control. Anand first.
Yeah, so I believe that that is standard language anyway captured in any contract, Daman.
But we
that
don't see
anything
the
which is
folded
beyond
hands in
reasonable.
the contract language.
So no, so you're saying that this is after the event has occurred and you want to invoke the contract. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm saying whenever it is written, this is what it means.
Right.
That when it will happen, the man is actually standing with
100% agree. 100% agree. Yes.
Okay.
Anything beyond the scope of what is covered within this contract where we've agreed to, if anything else goes beyond our control, absolutely.
Okay.
With
Great.
folded hands is absolutely right.
Okay. Ashit, 30 seconds.
I think that I agree with Anand in that case, that whatever is written, if something which is definitely beyond your control, like for example, cases of hurricanes striking in, the Gulf Coast in the US, or Sandy that happened in 2012 in New Jersey. This is something which is beyond you, beyond anybody.
Yes.
Now they were prepared with FEMA and everything. They could not avoid it.
Right.
But obviously.
Yeah. So we have
9/11 kind of event. What will you do in such case?
Right.
Or 26/11 in India, in Bombay.
So you are my customers. I'm the vendor. We have written some contract. I will provide you some services for which I will be charging you and you will be paying me. Right. And if I don't, then there is a penalty clause. But then we write this additionally that if it happens because of something which is beyond my reasonable control, then please do not penalize me. And we both are agreeing to that because both of us have signed. Let me show my screen once again. And I actually want you to read what comes on the side because it's full long paragraph. Quickly, I hope you can see my screen once again.
Yes.
What about this? So the moment we see 20 force majeure, that tells us that this is a portion from a real signed contract and it's long. So please take your own time and then we'll start some discussions. I have some questions and you will attempt to respond to those questions.
It's a fairly well-documented clause.
Thank you very much. So that's first impression, okay? And
only thing I would have included pandemic. Maybe this was before COVID-19.
It was, yes, of course it was, yes.
So I would now current language that I am seeing also includes pandemic.
Yes. Yes.
Terrorism, vandalism, you have said in the US also we see active shooter.
Yes.
So
Okay.
that's very common in the US
Right.
because of the gun
Okay.
control law. So some of those languages will vary depending on the country you are in. And even if it is not there, we tell them that I think you should include the active shooter or something like that.
Right.
People test now BCP, for even pandemic and all. Daman, you are
Right.
expert in that, so you know
Right.
that. So I will include at least these two words in this for the US
Right. Very good. Very
or
good.
rather globally.
Thank you, Doctor. Anand, your initial thoughts around this? Do you
Yeah.
want me to show that once again?
No, I've seen it. So I think it's fine. I think, like you said, the word reasonable comes in two different ways. One is reasonably unanticipated, and reasonable efforts have been put in to minimize the damage. I think if both of these have been done, then you could claim a force majeure, benefit if that happens, right? So I noticed that reasonableness very clearly.
Right.
But like I said, Daman, that if this is beyond the scenarios that are captured elsewhere in the document. So there would be some scenarios which by default are captured, which are intrinsic to the nature of that transaction.
Right.
So beyond
Included
that, I
but
think
not limited to, right?
yes.
That's once again legal language. Now you have covered yourself. All right. Okay. So
See, my funding went through recently, right?
right.
So I've signed a 58-page document, and you can imagine the number of scenarios that could have been captured there.
Yes.
Funding came
Right
from
from
US.
what happens if something happens to me, right? All the way up to everything else.
Right.
And there would have been a force majeure also on top of it, quite possibly, right? So I'm just saying that, if the objective is to be as explicit,
Right.
but whatever is remaining, if still, beyond reasonable anticipation or control, see, the important thing here to note is many times it's the customer who is likely to lose more than the supplier, right? Or the vendor. And therefore, the customer is not going to let go of this clause very easily when it's being drafted.
Right.
And many times, even if there is a force majeure, I would want to believe that there will be a certain damages that will still be limited, not unlimited, but limited, that may apply if there is a failure to perform the contract. It could be limited to the value of the contract. It could be limited to 2 times of the value of the contract, because sometimes determination of force majeure is not very easy, right? So sometimes maybe that language can be added. It all depends on what are the stakes.
Okay.
So that's what I would want to believe. So if this was, let's say, an airplane industry, and airplanes cost, millions of dollars per one unit of flight, right? And a 6-month delay can mean millions of dollars of revenue lost.
Okay.
So I'm sure they would look at force majeure very differently as compared to, let's say, a typical supply, purchase kind of a contract, where even the stake can be valuable. But you can imagine for an airplane industry, the dimension is very different.
Okay. So what comes to my mind is this is that type of clause that is two-way. So it's playing the same role. You are my customers, both of you. I'm the vendor. And I'm saying, please do not penalize me for something if I'm not able to deliver my services to you for something which is beyond my reasonable control. What are you saying, or what would you be saying when you are the customer and the event could happen at your end? Who stands to lose what? And what is my expectation then? That while you are down, I'm ready to deliver my services, but you are not able to receive my services, but I have done my job, so I should be paid. Is this what my expectation is? And will you be happy with that expectation?
I think that also many times, many things are worked out beyond agreement. Okay. Agreement, and this happens all the time. I have seen this many times. Because if supplier is ready to receive and customer is not ready, that happens many times here also. So what they do with customers, and normally suppliers are very accommodative. They said, okay, we will ship it later or something like that. Or if you can pay us because we have already spent the money to deliver. Customers are many times okay. They will pay off and they said, you hold it for us,
Okay.
maybe for a month or whatever. Then the supplier won't charge them for inventory carrying costs.
Okay.
So customers will definitely be accommodated because after all, they are customers, right? No
Right.
supplier is going to say, you pay me, otherwise I will not do business with you, because both of them need each other.
Right.
So if customer can accommodate supplier, obviously when the customer is in crisis for whatever reason, supplier would, because there may be force majeure at either side. It's not that it's only for delivery of goods and services.
Right.
It can happen on the customer side also.
Okay.
So when that happens, yes, that should be possibly, that is a solution that can work, that can be worked out.
Good. Thanks, Rashid. Anand, your views.
Yeah, so I guess I think I agree with the initial set of arguments that Ashit shared. Uh, what I'd just like to add is that at the end of the day, every business is primarily driven by relationship. Only when something goes wrong, you want to pick up the contract and see how to fight it
I
out,
like that.
right?
I
So
like
people
that.
will not look at it if, let us say, the customer is not prepared to take it. But fundamentally, let's say if the supplier has delivered as per the PO terms or as per the contract terms, he is eligible to raise a bill, and the customer is required to accept it. Whether it is part of any reason why he is unable to accept it is irrelevant. But he can always pick up the phone informally and make a request, anticipate in advance, and say we're going to have this problem. And if the supplier agrees to it, the contract anyway is a contract which is on the side. There is an agreement to say we are okay to live with that lapse, whatever be that lapse, right? And therefore it's all good, right? Only when there's a problem and you want to really take action is when the contract actually comes up.
Okay.
And that happened in the case of the insurance industry, that, like I said earlier, right, that they wanted to use that act of God for pandemic, and the government said rubbish, it's not
Okay.
possible, you got to honor your medical insurance bills for
Right.
patients. So you can take advantage of it if you want to, but otherwise the whole idea here is that there is an ongoing relationship and you don't want to hurt that relationship.
Good. Thanks. And I like that. Building, maintaining, and enhancing relationships. And I take it up to organizational resilience when I teach that, when I discuss that topic. But I also make a statement, both Anand and Ashit, that this is business and no emotions is business. I feel now I'm becoming the moderator. I'm coming out of that role of the supplier. It seems to me that you are emotional at this point in time when you have made these statements as good customers. Let's understand the case once again. Go into the case once again. I'm saying you are customers. I'm the vendor or supplier. I'm saying I'm ready to provide the services, but you had gone through a disaster. And my expectation is, but I'm ready. I have done my job. I have spent some time, money, effort into that, and I should be paid. Are you sure you will be? You're struggling within your organization. You need extra expenses there, perhaps. And here is the one who is saying, this is my invoice because I'm ready according to the contract. So at that time, perhaps now you would be invoking force majeure clause. The one, yes, we understand you have spent money, but while there's no penalty, I believe, to the customer ever, it's penalty only to the vendor.
On the supplier.
Right? So I'm again repeating quickly, again, 30 seconds each of you. Take emotions out of this. Practically, what will you do as customers? Will you be willing to pay me?
If I were to answer that question as a customer, two things can happen. I can initially make a request and consider if they can, if I can, take the goods and goods delivery later on and pay that time. Or force majeure, as you said, on the customer side will not hold much sense, and suppliers already spend the money and all. So I think again it's a question of beyond what is contained in the
reasonable control.
Legal agreement of force majeure. It's the question of how they arrive, because everything that cannot be settled in the court of law.
Okay.
Otherwise, you will not have a law of arbitration or anything like that. So they will come to some conclusion and then they will accommodate each other. Most times, this is what happens. Now, if there are different situations. If customer has modified intentions, it doesn't want to pay for some reason or other, it's a different thing.
All right.
But normally, basically they should be able to settle between themselves.
Understood. Good.
Maybe he will pay 50% and 50% upon delivery, or some terms can be worked out, which is not within that agreement.
So once again, in the interest of time, we need to move on. I have few other questions to be raised, but it seems you are playing by your emotions. You are attempting to be a good customer, not a real customer. Please do not mind, but these are my observations as a moderator. Anand, your views.
No, I'm not saying I'm playing by emotions. I'm saying that I'm going to honor what supplier says, but I will make a request and tell him that, yes, this is what is there in the contract, and I agree with you, dear, this is due to you. But I would request that if you can come to some settlement. Like when supplier makes a request, there is no question of any emotions. That's what has happened. Same way customer can make a request.
Okay. Good, thanks. Anand, your views.
Yeah, so I guess that force majeure clause will definitely be invoked, because if the stakes are equally high for the supplier, there is no way that he's going to agree. So when I said relationship, the presumption is that the cost to the supplier is not very high. The supplier can take that hit, whether it is hit of delayed supply or hit of delayed payment or whatever it is. But if you go back to the airline industry, all of us know what happened to this Boeing 787 MAX story, right? So they were grounded for almost 2 years. So I am sure force majeure clauses were used everywhere, and many of them may not have been accepted. And Boeing had to pay the penalties. There's a huge penalty that was paid for delay, for loss of revenue to their customers, right? Whoever it was. So force majeure clause would be invoked when the expectation of a loss from the other side is expected to be very high. Otherwise, we may not want to go there. So I guess that the short answer is force majeure will be invoked if we anticipate that the party may have trouble in accepting our request.
Right. So I am
That's
Boeing.
the simplest way to.
I am Boeing.
Yes.
I went through that challenge and I invoked. I would have invoked. We don't know full stories. What has happened really? How much have they lost? Right. So I could have invoked force majeure clause. Anand, you are Indigo. You had placed an order of 200 Boeing 787s with me, and I'm saying, please do not penalize me here, because most likely there was a penalty clause for delays on my part. I'm Boeing, right?
Yes.
And the same, actually, it is COVID-19 pandemic, when Indigo has gone down because all airlines suffered, right? Boeing is ready to deliver, but Indigo is not ready to receive.
So I'm saying it works both ways, Taman. Yeah, it is the same. So we are talking from a customer's perspective only, while I use the example of Boeing as a supplier, but I'm saying that the logic is the same for the customer. So if the customer, like Indigo or whoever it is, believes that that they are not going to be able to, Boeing is not going to be able to afford this, they are going to invoke the clause, and they might have done it too. I don't have that visible in the public domain.
We understand that. Yes, we will.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, in my opinion, Raman and Anand, most times, I'm saying almost 100%, maybe some exceptions. Whenever there are public safety crisis or health and safety crisis, now Boeing example, there was definitely a passenger safety and public safety issue.
Right.
Obviously, there is nothing they could do, because FAA told them to ground the planes. There is nothing they can do about it, because that's come from a regulator.
Right.
Absolutely. So they could invoke the force majeure. Same way DGCA, if they invoke that you cannot fly those for planes in India, what can Boeing do, or what can Indigo do? It's the same thing.
Right.
So I think in such situations, normally force majeure would apply, because it's concerning the larger population, passenger safety, public safety issues, health and safety, etc.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me share the slide once again. In the past, simplest way, I'm going perhaps my younger years. Force majeure clause was called act of God, as simple as that. Right? And later on, some improvements have happened. Today we are talking of, we agreed that this was written before COVID-19 pandemic. So now even pandemic is being added, or few other events are being added slowly. At this time itself, this is maybe about 10 years old contract that had been written. We already see acts of God, fires, floods, explosions, riots, wars. And I used to be surprised how force majeure initially long ago was just act of God, something which is beyond my control. I'm a human being. What is beyond my control? Only thing which is act of God. So how could war come into this? God doesn't make wars. We make wars. So how and why is this into this clause, and how and why is this a force majeure event? That comes to mind. And quickly, once again, both of you, one by one, and first, this time.
So we are talking about an event that is not foreseeable. That's an event which is not in your control. And right now, whatever is happening, even with the Ukraine war, is pretty much that way, right? So clearly, I would say that it falls under force majeure. But since you explicitly mentioned floods and other events, Daman, I might want to go back and understand that nowadays floods and these riots and all of these are meant to be part of your typical business risk management, BCP, disaster management, crisis management programs, which you are separately in some other portion of the document or in a different client contract, you are agreeing that you have them in place, right? So many of these may get challenged today to say that why are they force majeure? Because your programs, you're anyway confirming that you have an ISO 22301 certification.
Yeah.
So these, even if this happens, it should not get impacted. You should not invoke a force majeure. That's a strong possibility that is likely to come.
Good. So if you go to the court, you will win. You are the customer.
If I go to the court, and yes, if the supplier is the person who's invoked it, but who's also signed up for saying that I'm complying with certain things, I can win. I can, if not 100%, I can definitely claim unreasonable damages straight away, right? The reasonable part of it anyway is normal loss, but yeah, I can definitely claim that straight away.
All right. Okay. Thanks. Ashit, your views?
So, sir, in this particular case, what Anand says also holds true, but I would add one or two more dimensions to this, and that is one of the most important one is that even if I have BCP everything, that means I'm showing that I have taken due care and reasonable assurance to prevent any mishap to happen or any untoward situation to happen.
Right.
But if that happens despite me having BCP, that means that I have proven to you that I have put everything in place. But how can I fight nature? Obviously, when something like Sandy happens, people had still BCP, but I have seen companies that are wiped out. So there is nothing you can do about it, because when such things happen, it's very difficult to control. And that is why possibly I would invoke force majeure. So there are always, obviously, there are two important dimensions: reasonable assurance that needs to be given that you have those controls in place.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So it seems what we are sensing is some new events are getting added. Sometimes even war was not there. And then we say pandemic or active shooter, some specific to some countries or some geographies, for example, are being added. But at the same time, the sense coming up is there are some events which are basic minimum. Now, if you are implementing BCM, risk, crisis, etc., flood, fire, earthquake should have been taken care of. So the question comes to mind that logic appears to be reasonable, but why are these not getting out of the clause? Clause is getting extended. It's not shrinking, that only 2-3 left now. Everything else should have been taken care of by BCM and crisis and risk.
Because there is a major reason behind it. And the reason is that you can mitigate the risk. You cannot eliminate the risk.
We understand
you can
that.
put all the controls, BCP, BCM, everything, and mitigate the risk to the extent that you can manage. But if it happens, you know the catastrophe. Even if the probability, what you are trying to do is you are bringing down the probability of occurrence with BCP and all. You cannot eliminate the occurrence itself. So in case that happens, the catastrophe would still be there, and hence that clause would still be there. Because you cannot eliminate earthquakes, you cannot eliminate fire, you cannot, no matter what you do. Otherwise, country like US would be numero, with FEMA and everything in place. With
Yeah.
FEMA in place, they could not prevent such damages in New Orleans,
Understood.
in Katrina.
Yes.
So, absolutely.
Okay.
It's
Thanks.
again talking about the risk.
All right. Thank you. So we'll go to the risk champion. Anand, your views on this.
Sir, I need to leave, but thank you for your time.
Understood. Thank you very much, Ashit.
Thank you, Anand. Very nice meeting
Thanks,
you, sir.
Ashit. Nice meeting you.
Good luck.
All the
I'm
best.
leaving you in good
Please
hands
take
of
care.
Daman, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know whether that is a warning.
And you, no.
That is a
It's
compliment.
a very, very interesting discussion. I wish I had it.
Thank you very much.
But
Thanks. Thanks, Ashit.
please send us the recording.
Yes, please. I will.
Daman, sir.
Yes. I will.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Chalo, Jai Bajrangbali. Thank you.
Anand, your views on that?
Yes, Naman. So, like you asked, right? So, very clearly, it's that beyond reasonable, which is what is going to be under force majeure. And that reasonable portion definitely needs to be, represented or supported by something
Right.
like risk management or
Right.
BCM.
Okay. Great. I used to give another example, and this is around that relationship, etc., that you have said, and I fully am in agreement with that. But once again, play the role. You are the customer, I am the vendor. Heavy rains, due to which heavy floods, due to which interruption, I face a disaster in my organization. And I say I am invoking the force majeure clause because it is written there. Flood, fire, earthquake, everything was written there. You do not agree to that because the term is reasonable control. So we go.
Correct.
You drag me to the court, and the court, it seems it is possible that you would win if you are able to prove that it was not beyond my reasonable control. So, for example, whether the lawyer, advocate, or the judge, or you yourself, someone would ask me this question, Daman, rains not in your hand, that's act of God, understood, beyond your control. Floods due to that, not under your control, understood, but your office was in the flood prone area. So what was within your reasonable control was that you could have built, should have built your office away from the flood prone area. So you have not taken beyond a reasonable control. That's why Anand wins. Your views around this case, this discussion that I have attempted to build.
Yeah, so not just this, Taman, I think any risk which a customer sees in a supplier's place, because that's where you do a due diligence, especially when it matters, right? So you do a
Right.
supplier due diligence and you come out with a lot of concerns, right? And those
Okay.
concerns are typically captured in the agreement directly.
Right.
So anything beyond that again would go into force majeure. So I would totally agree that an example like what you took would not qualify to be supported through the force majeure. But I'd imagine that the customer due diligence would have picked this up and they would have captured that concern separately. Many times you agree to carry out a BCM in place as part of the assurance.
Right.
And I think before the event happens, if you don't have that in place, again, there is going to be a loss. So it could go many ways, but I guess your the simplest answer is yes, in that case, it would not be tenable. So the
Okay.
supplier or whoever is at fault would
Okay.
not be able to defend it.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay. So I'll come back to some portion which perhaps during our discussions we have missed to address, that it seems the definition is extended. Long ago, it was perhaps just act of God. Then we started adding more, even war came in, terrorism came in, flood, fire, earthquake came in, pandemic came in, and we are saying active shooter, etc. Some specific events coming in. While the intention, understanding is that some are now within BCM risk crisis, flood, fire, earthquake, basic minimum. Right? So why are these not getting out of the force majeure clause?
So the first thing is because they are still the unanticipated portion and beyond reasonable effort portion,
Okay.
right? Which is what is coming under force majeure. So it still kind of qualifies.
Okay.
But the practical answer to this could be that there's a different team that is constructing the contract, and there's a different team that is responsible for
I like
solving
that.
the issues that come, right? So
I
that could
like
be the
that.
practical thing of looking at it.
Yeah.
But the reality is that a legal lawyer anywhere in the world is going to use the same term. It's not going to change because company A's legal lawyer thinks differently about the risk as compared to company. It's a standard clause that is put in. And I think the only thing which can be argued is what is reasonable. And there, if you have a way to define it, I think the companies will then do well, right? If there's a way to define what reasonable means, especially for force majeure, I think then the companies would have cleared that for themselves. That's my belief.
Good. Thank you very much. Let me share the screen once again, and then I have a couple of questions before we wind up. You can see my screen once again, right? So
yes.
Quick read again, if you wish to. And the question in mind is, does it appear to be one-way or one-sided clause?
No, it says either party
Either
straight
party.
away.
Right.
And delay or failure in the performance. So clearly, performance is presumed to be defined somewhere else. So you would have roles and responsibilities of the customer, roles and responsibilities of the service provider or vendor. That would be in a different part of the contract. Then this would be fine.
Right. Good. I agree with you. I myself, well, this is what perhaps I've seen, I've executed, I've gone through this, but I'm admitting I have never invoked. There was once upon a time, lifetime chance to invoke. We went to legal, and 3 days the decision couldn't be given whether that event was a force majeure clause event. And we actually even recovered within those 3 days. So first time when I read, I actually had missed to read either party portion. But second read had told me that it is not one-sided. It takes care of both. Second question comes to mind is, can you recommend some improvements? Do you see any improvements?
Yeah, besides the fact that you want to expand the scope even beyond this to pandemics, etc.
Okay.
I think that one element which I would like to add for sure is that when do you invoke the force majeure? Do you invoke the force majeure after you've had a claim from a customer, or vice versa? Or do you invoke the force majeure the moment you think that that event of a force majeure has happened? Right? Say, for example, there has been a flood event, right? And you should ideally invoke the force majeure the moment you realize that this is beyond reasonable control, right? And in a way, you're giving advance notice to the customer, especially if it is regular supplies. The customer can then take timely action. So I think one is when to invoke the force majeure may be a useful thing. The second is, like I said earlier, can we attempt to define what reasonable means, right? And the third one, which I guess is very practical, is that I will only compensate you if you have already not got compensation from insurance. So you will require to have insurance, right, for many of these risks, because these are all insurable risks, right? And therefore, if insurance company se paise aapko mila hai, then I don't need to reimburse you. So typically what happens is when there is it may not be in force majeure, but it would be in some other part of contract to say that if there is any compensation that is payable as a result of non-performance of this contract, it will be subject to any deductions because of insurance claims that you already received. Right. So that's how it would work. And maybe you could also get yourself insured to say that if there's a force majeure event, can I go and take insurance to protect myself against a force majeure event, right? So there are two different ways. One is you may have already insured, and then what I can get from the aggrieved party has to be ideally net of the aggrieved party will ensure that they don't end up paying, and the party also gets money from insurance. So these are 2-3 things that I definitely add, and then obviously expanding the definition.
Okay. So this is episode 5. Episode 2 I had kept as NDA and force majeure clause. And we started with NDA discussions and we fell short of time. So we made part 2 of NDA, and then we came to force majeure clause today. Coming towards
Right.
end, Anand, you have raised a point when you said when to invoke force majeure.
Right.
In the BCM journey, BCM programs, you have struggled a lot on when to invoke BCM. And
True.
when you have raised this towards end, it seems I need to bring you back again in episode 2 of Force Majeure Clause. So I hope you will be able to spare time once again for us.
Bilkul, sir.
Next question comes in mind is, do you get paid even if you don't deliver? And we had some discussions already around that.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I'm happy to skip this, but I still have a question in mind, which again, you have started touching actually already. I think you're a mind reader. You know my questions before I bring those questions in front of you. Is there an insurance to cover the force majeure events?
Generally, there are, right? So generally, all of these are insurable, right? But again, insurance company, before they choose to give you, they will also understand what kind of effort you're taking to minimize the impact from here. So that's the same thing that essentially an insurance companies does.
Okay.
So yes, what we have to worry about if we want to get cover, what we have to worry about is what is the insurance document talking about in terms of force majeure.
Okay.
So under what circumstances they will not honor the claim is what we should worry about. These risks fundamentally are anyway, risks which can be covered.
Okay.
They can be insured. They may all not be under the same head. They would be given different names. Say, for example, political risk insurance is a different product,
Okay.
right? Environmental liability insurance is a different product.
Mhm.
Loss of profit insurance because of a fire or a flood or a typical act of God, which is basically a natural event, is a separate product, right? So
Okay.
I may get insurance for a fire or a flood or an earthquake, but I may not get it for a war because the insurance terms do not cover war. So I have to be a little careful.
Okay.
And maybe I need to expand my coverage of insurance. So that's the only way. But I could get insurance for most of this, if not everything,
Right.
for sure.
Right. I'm going maybe 5 minutes back into the discussions. Anand, when you had said that if all we have been paid through an insurance, I shouldn't be. And it makes logic. Paid double,
Yes.
right? I cannot.
Yes.
It's not ethical. It's not legal, etc., etc. But what I feel is, assume I have taken fire insurance, and there is a fire in my building, and in all good faith relationship, XYZ, whichever way, the insurance company pays me. Insurance company pays me for the damages that I have suffered.
So the loss has suffered. Correct.
But the point is force majeure clause. Why am I invoking this? I'm going to the client that I'm not able to deliver you because of a fire. Please do not penalize me. So there I'm attempting to save the penalties. I'm not looking at the damages that I have suffered. Those damages get recovered to an extent, not 100%.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
So there is some difference.
Agreed. I stand corrected.
I would be taking insurance claims also, and I will be looking at the client also to not penalize me. Those penalties, I'm not sure. Perhaps there is no insurance for those penalties. Or is there any insurance?
There isn't. There is partly. So for liquidated damages, loss of performance, there can be insurance, but it can be for very natural events like fires, floods, and explosions. But the premium that you pay is higher, right? So for example, if my factory gets burnt, it's not just the inventory which I'm taking. I'm also going to book in a loss of profit there.
Okay.
And that money is also paid by insurance.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anand. So as it seems, at least one question, when to invoke force majeure is forcing us to go into part 2 of force majeure clause. Along with that, we have started touching upon insurances also, and we have good authority around that topic as well. So I may like to bring in something which is called business interruption insurance. And we discuss that along with force majeure part 2 in the next episode or whenever you are able to spare time.
Absolutely. No issue. So the loss of profit and the BI are the same. So we can definitely talk about it. Okay. Absolutely.
Great. So quickly, while winding up for our audience, I'm showing, and then Anand, you can give now because we couldn't have the judge today. Now you play that role of judge also, kind of winding up, summarizing the discussions, etc., and attempt to see or say what I'm saying, whether you agree, disagree, whether this is good, bad, or ugly. A checklist.
Right.
For writing the force majeure clause. Include the types of events that will be covered, which you actually brought in. Then make it two-way, which we have seen perhaps mostly. My experience is mostly the force majeure clause was written two-way, the either party. This is something in the given sample example that I had picked up, that there was no date defined. Have a date defined to exit the assignment. You are a customer. Once again, for the last time in this session, you play that role of a customer. I play the role of the vendor. I have gone through a disaster. I'm saying, please do not penalize me, because something beyond my reasonable control has happened. And you are a reasonable client. You are saying, okay, the month, no penalties. But for how long? Are you saying 1 day's delay, 1 week delay, 1 month delay, 1 year's delay? For how long do you expect me to wait? I've seen some other force majeure clauses where that period has been defined, but it was not in this one that we had picked up. So your views are that. These are 3 points I was picking up.
Yeah. No, I think these are very valid points. Definitely, I think having a date limitation also is very important, as much as you're talking about also when to intimate, right? So it's very important to announce that there's been an event, so that you can then rightfully claim it. Many times it's the same thing as insurance, right? Unless and until you report that you had the accident within 24 hours, they can always say that your claim will not be accepted for whatever reason, right? So they have a reason which is unique to their industry, because they don't want any tampering to be done with evidence, or they feel that the evidence will go away. But similarly, customers would like to have some information immediately. It's the same thing with cyber law. The moment you have a cyber event, you got to inform your customers in 24 hours or 12 hours or 48 hours. I think there's some new law which is coming up now. So that information, I think, of any event which is substantial, which could qualify for force majeure, I think that should be definitely there. And I would imagine that if there is a possibility to define what reasonable means, that will be a great thing if that's possible, right? So these are 2 things which I definitely like to add.
Great, thanks. If you can take few more seconds, a minute, to wind up then overall impression of the session.
Absolutely. So from my side, I think force majeure is centrally linked to this area of risk, and and also crisis management and BCP. It's very fundamentally linked. I think this would have been invoked many times during the last 2 years for various reasons. I think this is a clause that is going to stay, and it's going to be improved for all the practicalities that people might have experienced in the last 2 years, and for the reasons that we have also agreed here. And I think that I just think that people will slowly start understanding and integrating this to how can you either prevent an unjust exploitation of this clause from the other party, or how to be prepared to ensure that you are de-risking yourself by ensuring a force majeure event from your side. I think people should think about that as we move forward, especially the risk community. And it's a great place to partner with your legal team on. That's what I'd like to believe.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Anand. Last slide before we say bye-bye to each other. Something which is coming up from my side. I'm working on a mission zero unemployment in the country. When I say it's not me alone. We have a team, Pringle. We are working on this. It's a big dream, very difficult, long journey, but we are looking forward to everyone joining hands with us. So a book is coming out, which we are calling Sone Ki Chidiya Ko Jagao. The synopsis of the book is out now. Pre-booking is available. The book will be priced. We are planning to bring this out in August, which is kind of our blueprint to achieve or fulfill that dream of zero unemployment in the country. And the approach is very well defined through 3 E's, we call it: education, employment, and entrepreneurship. The existing organizations will not be able to generate as number of jobs that we need in the country. So we'll have to develop new companies also. We'll have to generate new companies also. So startups come into picture, which we believe become unicorns also. So The book will be priced at 1,200. Currently, pre-booking is available. It's just 300 rupees. And it's not, don't think anyone who is watching this, that this is a donation. This actually is your contribution to build the nation. 100% profits from this pre-booking sale of this book, even after pre-booking, 100% profits from this book sale will be invested back through an NGO into rural areas of India in enhancing employability and in education, bringing up, increasing the education. So we look forward to it. This is an appeal to all Indians across globe to do this a little bit. That's one, but we need 100,000 people coming with us as transformers, we call ourselves. So please come forward. There is a possibility of contributing. Everyone can contribute in some way or the other. So get in touch with us. We'll be happy to provide all the details. And the next one will be in a fortnight, the episode 6. We hopefully appear to be coming to part 2 of force majeure, and along with that insurance, and requesting Anand once again to spare time. I'll be in touch with you and others who want to come. Intention is 3-4 panelists and 1 judge. There is no real judging. This is a fun come learn activity. With that, thanks once again, Anand, to you and others who have left the scene. We will be back once again and as soon as possible in a fortnight.
Thank you, Raman. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.